Hello everybody and welcome back, and it is good to talk to all of you again today. By the way, if you are picking up any kind of background noise, I apologize for that. It is really stupidly windy right now and it is making some background noise. But hopefully the mic picks up as little of that as possible, and so we can actually do what we gotta do today. We'll just talk about the Russian destroyer split. Now, of course, just as a heads up, anything that I talk about right now is not final, so do expect potential changes to come. What I think we can do today, though, is talk about maybe sort of the direction that they were going with the Russian destroyer line split, and maybe talk about some of the ships and things that there are, certain peculiarities or whatnot. All right. I guess before I start, one other thing is, if you haven't checked out the John Wick Chapter 2 movie, you really should. And check out the first one as well. Very, very good movies. I actually enjoyed it. Did manage to catch a late night movie today with a friend, and yeah, absolutely fantastic movie. Anyways, okay, not too much off topic. Let's go back to these Russian destroyers. So there's been a couple of changes. I mean, notably, let's take a look at the text tree first. What's happened is that some ships have been moved, and a line's been split off at tier 8. And of course, there's a brand new tier 10 that's come into the game. Now, in terms of tier 5, where it used to be occupied by the Nyevny, now we have this new ship called the Pvoi. Yeah, Russian ship names. I'm not really much good at that, but let's take a look at the ship. Looks-wise, honestly, she looks quite a bit like the Leningrad, to be honest, but not the Leningrad. In fact, you'll sort of see Leningrad's almost like sister ship at tier 7. But she does look kind of similar. In terms of her gun placement and everything, yeah, very, very similar to the Leningrad. The thing that I guess was the most sort of significant change from the Nyevny is, one, these gun turrets. First of all, they do traverse quite a bit faster. So for those of you who played the Nyevny before, you'll know that one of sort of like the big problems with those particular guns was they just traversed really, really slow. So these ones seem to have alleviated that issue. Their firing rate, however, is, oh, they're pretty stupidly slow. They're not very fast firing guns. Sort of like the guns on the Krasny Krim and I think maybe even the Svetlana. So not very, very fast firing guns. You've got 5 of them. They're still the 130mm guns. That's sort of the first thing I noticed. Another thing is these ships are actually huge. They're really, really big ships. And that might be a problem for a ship that is of this size with, again, sort of poor gun range, right? You'll notice that the main battery firing range is like 9.5, and I think I have the ship fully upgraded too, yeah. So when you have it stock, it's 8.7. That will be painful for a ship that's this big with pretty high detectability numbers. So tier 5 looks like it's gonna get interesting. Oh yeah, the other thing, obviously I forgot something, because, I am a potato at late hours of the night. The ship is really fast. This Pvoi goes 42 knots at tier 5. Now, there is not one other destroyer at tier 5 that's gonna come close to that speed. So she is incredibly fast. So maybe she's gonna occupy that role of like a hyper light cruiser, maybe? I don't know. It's not really sure why they moved the Nyevny and replaced it with this, to be honest. Like, I look at the ship and I'm like, not really sure why you're here. I thought the Nyevny was actually fine at tier 5, so I'm not really sure why they introduced this ship to take her place. But anyway, so that's what the tier 5 kind of looks like. Now, as for the Nyevny, well, that particular ship has been moved up to the tier 6, and it's become the Gordy now. Gordy? Okay, not going to try that name again. And this is another one of these decisions that I'm not exactly too understanding of. I thought the Nyevny was actually fine at tier 5. She has her flaws, those really, really short-range torpedoes, the guns that have really slow traverse. But yeah, they moved her up to tier 6. So, I guess she's in sort of the same category now as the Anshan. I don't really think she's going to be all that good. I mean, the ship she replaces, which is the Grozovoi, wasn't all that spectacular either, but just Yeah, I'm not really sure about this decision, to be honest. You have exactly the same thing with the Nyevny, and it's just up a tier. Take a look at the Nyevny right now. Okay, yes, I know HP is a bit lower, but in terms of our guns, you know, pretty much identical specs. I guess the only change really is that you do have a little bit more gun range, so you can shoot from a little bit further out, and if you fully spec your captain for like AFT and concealment, you have a bit of stealth fire at like the edges there. But, the penalty is still quite a big penalty. You don't have the Grim Yashi's penalty for Gunbloom. It's the Nyevny's penalty, so that's pretty big. So yeah, I'm not really sure why this ship got moved to 6. Just don't really think that she belongs in 6, honestly. Maybe they just wanted to make Gremyashi the glorious Soviet Tier 5 destroyer of awesome that will never be displaced by anything. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not really sure why the Gordy moved up to 6. I guess, I mean, like, yeah, there is one other change, I guess. The like turret traverse is a tiny bit faster than the Nyevny, but like once you're talking 32-second turret traverse stock, you're not really getting any faster there. So yeah, a bit of a strange decision. I mean, maybe they're just trying to get like the whole gunboating concept knocked into people like really early on and just force them to always gunboat. I don't know. Just not really sure about the tier 6. I'm hopeful. I'm hoping that some other changes really get thrown in there. Just give it something else to play with, because in its current form, I just don't know. All right, let's move on to 7. And at 7, replacing the Kiev is the Minsk. And the Minsk is essentially the Leningrad's little sister, big sister. I'm not really sure, but it's basically the sister ship to the Leningrad, and it's the Minsk. And I guess there might be some like Russian city rivalry there or something, where Leningrad's better, Kappa, because Leningrad actually has those great torps, while the Minsk does not. Everything else pretty much is identical. I mean, similar firing ranges, the same guns, same speed, essentially. Yeah, just literally copy pasta of like the same ship. And comparatively speaking to the Kiev, I think the Minsk is actually a bit of a downgrade. But again, with basically not usable torpedoes at all, just maybe they're trying to force you into that gun support role early and getting you to really learn it. Not really sure about the motivation about placing the Minsk here either. I mean, the Russian destroyers, like when they get that change, well, in my opinion, feel pretty anemic from 5 to 7. I mean, the Leningrad was good, but the reason I liked that ship was because it actually had workable torpedoes. But these ones, it's purely guns, and yeah, not really sure about that one. All right, but moving up to, let's say, tier 8, and that's where you have that split. And the split is where I think you see that thinking of where Wargaming, I think, wants these two Russian lines to go. And I'm going to cover the line which is going to end at the Khabarovsk first, because that's the ship that we have right now in game. And so that's being replaced at tier 8 by the Yavan, which is basically the Kiev, but sort of like the old Kiev. So you've got good HP pool again. Hooray! For those of you who've been dying to get like your Kiev back into action, you got a bit more HP here. Still got those guns that work. You got nice main battery firing range stock. Okay, when I say stock, I meant like without skills. I mean, obviously, I have gotten the upgraded module. I mean, really stock. It's 11.1. So, but if you get AFT on it, the range is going to be decent even with that stock module. But this one's really like the gunboat. I think these are the pure gunboats that they want on the Russian line. Because in terms of everything else, I mean, you'll see that the guns are pretty darn solid. The Yavan has 8-kilometer torps. They go 55 knots. But they're 14,400 damage torps, so they're a little bit on the low end. And I think there's going to be that shift there, by the way, which I'll point out in a second. AA-wise, let's not talk about that. Speed, yay. I mean, these gunboats are nice and fast. Yes, the bloom is huge on their concealment. They don't really have much concealment to go for it, but this is going to be that like nice, solid, punchy tier 8 destroyer. Not going to play the same role as the Benson, which, is the best destroyer in the game in terms of utility, but it's gonna serve as a pretty solid gunboat. And again, because it's not a trash can, I think people are gonna like it. Trash can's issue was always it was just too big, too much of a shell magnet. Plays more like a light cruiser than, let's say, a destroyer. Well, I think the Yavan will play more of like that destroyer sort of play style rather than the hyper light cruiser with no citadels. And then, of course, from that, where you go is the trash can. So yeah, so see what they did is the trash can used to be at 8. Now they moved the trash can to 9, and they called it the Ashkabad. So it's a trash can moved up a tier, and it's still really bad. I mean, like, I read the name, and after looking at it, I was like, oh, this ship basically can be nicknamed "I'm so bad," because yeah, it's not really all that great. Identical guns to the Kiev, so no improvements there. No improvements even to like rate of fire. Range, again, if you don't have a captain on this bloody ship, main battery firing range is, in fact, even when you upgrade, it's actually worse than the Kiev. So that's the first downer. It's like tier 9, and your guns are worse. So derp. The only thing I thought was really interesting about the Ashkabad is actually its torpedoes. I mean, when I first looked at the ship, I was like, the torpedoes are interesting, because with the torpedo modules on the ship that you can get, so if you actually like slap on like torpedo reload module, which is kind of not a thing that you would want to run on a pure gunboat, but if you do, you can actually get sub 1 minute reloads on 8-kilometer torps that go 60 knots that do 15,100 damage. So I don't know, play Ashkabad as a Soviet torpedo boat, even though it's on a gunboat line. It's just, I don't know, this one's also a bit of a weird ship for me. Taking it into battle, she's got all the flaws of the trash can, big detectability, not like any kind of superiority really guns wise. Really, like, I thought the only interesting thing were the torpedoes. So yeah, the Ashkabad, still really bad. I guess the one big change, right? I forgot to mention. The one big change is you get a heal. Yay! So, yeah, I mean, the Ashkabad really can be played as a super light cruiser with no citadels, because, the Russians obviously decided after building light cruisers with citadels that it'd be a better idea just to go ahead and just give you a destroyer that's really a light cruiser that is, okay. I'm going off topic here. So yeah, I mean, the Ashkabad overall, I don't know. I'm not too impressed with the ship, and at tier 9, yeah. Yeah. See, like, one of the reasons, like, I preferred in the past when I was playing, like, with the tier 9, the Uday, is that the Uday was at least smaller. I mean, you were smaller, more nimble-ish ship. I mean, the friggin' Ashkabad is just, like, huge. Yes, you do have a bit more HP, and you have the heal now, but, God, everybody's gonna want to shoot at this huge thing. So, yeah, Ashkabad. Alright, and so, then, of course, you move on to tier 10, and you have the Khabarovsk. And I don't think I really need to explain too much about the Khab. She is gonna be all the awesome that she was before with a heal now. So you give up your smoke for a heal, and so you can stay around longer and pelt people with your 130mm shells of awesome. Filled with Stalinium, such glorious shells, guided by a glorious hand of Stalin. Okay, anyways. That's it. I don't need to talk about the Khabarov. She's gonna be even more epic, right, with the heal. Okay. Alright, let's go back to the other line, the new line. Because it's the new line that I think starts to get interesting at the end. How about that? Let's say that. Interesting at the end. The new Russian line is, I think, Wargaming's attempt to have a Russian destroyer line that does some utility support things. So that's what I think this line is for. It's this, it's to have these destroyers act as more fleet support rather than be loners, right? So the Cobb, for example, is a bit of a loner ship, right? You can kind of play the Cobb on a flank and you'd be okay. The new line, I think, almost is designed to either stick with fleets or stick with groups of destroyers and offer them a little bit of like support. So let's start with the Opazny, which is the Grozovoi, now moved up 2 tiers. So and take a look at this particular ship. So firepower wise, she's the same. Yay, you have 4 guns and 2 dual turrets. But you do have 2 quintuple torpedo launchers now. And they are actually nice torpedoes. Like the Russians finally built a torpedo that's actually decent. No, I'm just kidding. But you get 10-kilometer torps that go 56 knots, and they actually hit okay, like 15,100. You know, everything else is pretty much the same as an Grozovoi, except for the HP. Your guns have the same kind of pew-pew-ness. You have some AA potential there, some keyword, some. You're not super fast, 37 knots, and like this other line of Russian destroyers are not going to be that fast. So it's again kind of emphasizing more that supporting role where you're with your big ships, right? And the big difference compared to this line to the other line is that this new line gets access to defensive fire instead of speed boost. So speed boost is again one of those more selfish consumables. You run off and you chase after things. Well, defensive fire is more like support your own team, and if you hit that against the CV, you're just going to piss them off to no end. And that's kind of what this new line is kind of for. Just go ahead, hang around with your fleet, and piss off CVs that want to get close to you. So, Opazny, again, I mean, the A is not all that awesome, right? Mind you, the A is kind of right? But hey, at least you can disrupt some planes. And you have these torpedoes that can offer a little bit of screening. So that's something. Moving up to tier 9, and we essentially have the Uday. And yeah, I mean, what else can I really say about the ship? It's the Uday. The only difference, I think, is the torpedoes. You have, same 8-kilometer range torpedoes, but they're faster. They go 66 knots. They also do a little bit less damage, though, but at least they're faster. They're 14,600 damage torpedoes. We compare them to the Uday's torpedoes right now. They're 15,100 damage torpedoes. And, of course, the new ones are faster but less stealthy. They're easier to detect. So that extra speed maybe doesn't offer as big of an advantage. Everything else is pretty much identical. So, yeah, I mean, and again, if you look at the, the consumables, you have access to defensive AA fire. But, again, your AA is pretty crap at this particular ship. So, but at least you can kind of play the support role, right? Kinda. And again, honest to God, if I had to choose between the Uday versus the Ashkabad, I'd happily take the Uday. Just plays more like a destroyer and isn't as much of a shell magnet because you're smaller of a target. Anyways, okay. Moving on to the ship that is the interesting one. Grozovoi, right? This is the tier 10. It's brand new, and she has one hell of an interesting quirk. Her AA. This ship's AA is just ridiculous, right? Assuming, here's the keyword, assuming you build it for full AA build. So if you spec your captains for AA, grab all the AA modules, you're going to have absolutely kick-ass AA. I think your AA rating is like 92. If you couple it with the defensive fire, I managed to whack like 20-something Hakuryu planes in attack wave. So really, really crazy good AA. But one of the things you'll find out very soon, at least when I played her, and again, remember, work in progress, please keep that in mind, is that the ship is, she does something different. She does offer some new things, but it's not like she is, aside from her AA, she doesn't make all the other destroyers obsolete, right? So, for example, the Grozovoi versus a Khabarovsk in a gun duel, most likely he's going to lose, right? So the Khab has those 2 extra guns, and the Khab has armor. So if you start spitting HE against the Khab, most likely you're going to lose that fight. The one times where I've had the initial early edge on a Khab is when I was able to get into range. Khab gives me a broadside, bam, hammer in like 1 or 2 salvos of AP, do some good AP damage there against the Khab, and then of course, try to use HE or whatever to trade my way, to a victory. You are a little bit more, you are better at concealing yourself, than a Khab, so you are stealthier. That is something that's going to give you an edge in a cob engagement. You do have pretty nice torpedoes, right? You have 10 km torps, 65 knots. They're nice and speedy. They do decent damage, 14,600. Again, but the damage is not like the ship destroying damage that you'll see on something like a Shimla or something like that, where you get whacked by a bunch of those torpedoes, they hurt like hell. These ones, I mean, I hit like a Yamato with like 5 and the Yamato kind of went, all right, I took some torps. It still hurt, but not the same level, right? But hey, you do have workable torpedoes, and with a decent concealment, you can actually use these torpedoes quite frequently. The guns, they're good. They're able to do damage. They are able to whack stuff pretty hard. But again, like I said, you're not going to out DPS a Cobb, and against, let's say, a gearing at closer range, I think the gearing's still going to chew you up. Rate of fire, just not all that amazing on these. In terms of the AA, though, like I mentioned, the AA is really, really powerful, but only if you build full AA. And the problem with that is that if you build full AA, I didn't run into CV. Oh, actually, no. I ran into CV once, I think, when I had the full AA setup. And that was like the only time where I actually got some use out of it. In fact, it was really funny. Like in all the other battles, I actually didn't get it. And then I was finally really sick and tired of having been AA spec'd and getting nothing out of it. So I was like, all right, that's it. I'm just going to go ahead and transition to more of a gunboat. And of course, the minute I did that, RNG's, or actually not RNG's, Matchmaker decided, haha, you decide to come out of AA here. I have a couple of CVs, so yeah, bit of a iffy situation there. So what I'd almost recommend is if they keep the ship similar to the way it is right now, I'd say that in terms of modules, you can go regular like gunboat modules, but in terms of consumables, pack defensive fire, and your captain, you can probably skill for things like manual AA and whatnot, just so that your AA still packs a punch, but you're able to be of a gunboat support role as well. She is reasonably fast, 41.5 knots with the flag, the speed flag. If you take that away, she's like 39, I think. Still pretty fast ship. Not the same speed as a Cobb, but this ship really is, I think, that sort of that pinnacle of them wanting like a fleet support Russian destroyer. That's what I think this ship is supposed to be. In terms of like, can she replace any of the other ships? I actually don't think so. I mean, the closest ship I think that she will come to maybe replacing is the Z-52. Like this one, I feel like has a higher chance of replacing a Z-52, but Z-52 has its advantages too, right? I mean, that sonar, if you're in games with no CVs, could be more useful. So again, what I'm starting to feel is maybe that's what they want to shift destroyers to, is away from that lone hunter mode and more into fleet play. I think that's why we're starting to see these, the last two destroyers, the Z-52 and this one. I think that's what they want. They want destroyers to hang around and offer, their support, whether it's gunfire, torpedoes, smoke, defensive fire, sonar, etc. And I'm almost wondering if that's what they're trying to do. But anyways, let's see what they do. I mean, I actually think the tier 10 is okay. I actually think that, yes, she's a bitch to CVs. I know that. But I feel like she's okay. She kind of has her own little spot that she fills. Is she going to replace the gearing? I don't think so. The gearing has things that this ship only can dream of. Those great torpedoes that the gearing has, the close range firepower. And yes, the gearing can still offer some of that AA utility as well, right? With, of course, better detectability and everything. So I feel like the ship does have her own place in the game, assuming they keep her the way she is right now. And I think she's actually all right. The other ships, however, like I mentioned earlier, are the ones I'm more concerned about, because they are the ones that I feel like are kind of not that good, and they probably need a little bit of help. Anyways, now that you've seen this, folks, let me know what you think. Do you agree with what I've said, or do you think that I've got it all wrong? Let me know in the comment section below. Aside from all that, have a good one, take care, and I'll talk to all of you again really, really soon.